All right, so I want to talk about one of my favorite time sinks that I've ever been a part of, and that's Monster Hunter. This franchise has been with me for about 16 years, and with it has come many ups and downs, and I want to go over those. In this video, I want to discuss my history with the franchise, and within that history, we're going to look at the successes and the places where I think some improvement could be made. I don't have all the games available to me right now, so you're getting this with some lovely wilds footage of me trying my best in the background. Without further ado, here's my Monster Hunter video. The beginning. I first remember hearing of Monster Hunter from the Wii commercials. Remember those? They starred a large Scottish man doing a number of comical things, ranging from scoffing at crabfishers for taking on such small prey to trying to get his Lagiacrus meat grilled at a fast food restaurant. Peppered into the ad, of course, were snippets of this vibrant, colorful world with fantastically armored characters wielding awesome weapons against some truly unique creatures. But I wasn't sold just yet. There were these articles about the game in Nintendo Power. Oh god, I miss video game magazines. We should really bring those back. They were sweet. In a number of the issues covering the game, I vaguely recall paragraphs in which they spoke about the process of hunting. They said something to the effect of like, first, you have to explore the map to find the monster, then find it and try to keep it from escaping the current area while you're hunting it, and if it does, you have to go and track down the monster again. And there are also lots of tools at your disposal, and you can even capture them. That sounded like way too much for me. In total honesty, it overwhelmed me. But the world seemed cool, and my brother was super intent on getting it, so we did. Oh, yeah, I have a brother. We played a lot. It's a different story. So we shared a Wii, and we were never able to play together on hunts because of that, because cooperative was only online. But we almost always accompanied the other when we booted up the game and followed our journeys as we built Moga Village back up and fought in some truly epic hunts against Jen Moran and Sideus. Of course, that only happened after I got past my first wall in Monster Hunter, Kurapeko. That's right. This little bird guy was my first wall. I failed this quest a couple of times and ended up putting the game down for a while. I mostly blamed the sword and shield, which is crazy to think since that's my main now for the past 3 games. I didn't find that it did enough damage for me at the time, and I couldn't find the dang thing every time it ran away from the area, so I eventually ran out of time. I guess I didn't have paintballs on me or something, or I didn't have my map. I'm not quite sure, but I do remember circling all of the areas in the desert constantly trying to find this guy. Eventually, I did pick the game back up, and my brother and I did actually get to those epic fights in Loklak, where, you get Jin Moran and all the extra stuff like Alatreon. Then we rolled credits. The things I enjoyed of Tri. The world and its interconnectivity. I loved being able to walk out of the village and go right into the action of D Island. This is something that I wouldn't really feel again until Wilds. I also loved building up the island, and honestly the progress of unlocking weapon types was really novel to me. It made me feel a couple of different things. One, it felt like I was earning these weapons, but most importantly, I think they narrowed down my options so I wouldn't be as overwhelmed. I was already overwhelmed, if you remember, at the prospect of tracking down these beasts like they were living, breathing creatures. And then on top of that, you give me, 11 different weapons to choose from? Because, heavy and light bow guns were kind of mixed together, and we didn't have Insect Glaive and Charge Blade at the time. But that was still a lot, 11 weapons. So the lack of choice at the beginning really helped me. And I found the slow opening of choices a fun incentive to try out the new shiny things that just popped up. Oh, look at that switch axe. Now I want to play it because it's now here. And I already got a feel for how the game played with, all the earlier stuff. I understand why this feature never came back, because, what if somebody was a switch axe main and they can't play their weapon until 40 hours into the game? That sucks. Anyway, something else I really enjoyed was a staple, until Rise, I'm pretty sure, was high-rank quests having a chance at spitting you out in a random location on the map instead of your home base at the start of a quest. You wouldn't have a map, since that was an item that you had to grab in your box, but you'd have a chance at arriving at one of the super rare spots with lots of high-value collectibles. You also had a chance at arriving directly in front of the monster that you were hunting, or some other terrible monster, instantly putting you in the action. It was really fun and novel, and I'm sad that they really haven't made their return that they went away in Rise and Sunbreak. It was always a treat, you know? Of course, if we look back now in the lore of things, I have to wonder how those characters got there, you know? It's like, you're not riding in on a wing drake. How are you suddenly, randomly finding yourself in front of a Devil Joe? Did you skydive out of the hot air balloon and things just went wrong? I don't know. But some improvements I'd like to see for Tri is, honestly, it's hard for me to remember too much about the things that really needed improving. This was a long time ago, after all. I do, however, recall being very nonplussed at the idea of the online lobby size. Only having 4 people to a lobby meant that if 3 people were already out on a quest when you entered, well, you had to wait until they finished their quest if you wanted to go hunt with them. And this part makes sense in the lore of it all, you know? These adventurers go get their gear, they set out on a ship to a remote destination. It wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense for you to be able to just kind of like pop in there randomly. But with 4-player lobbies and the generally longer hunt times people would be on, I would often find myself waiting of upward to 20 to 25 minutes, sometimes even more, you know, the time limit was 50, before they would get back and we could actually interact with one another. And even then, they might not like my armor, or they might not be doing quests that particularly interest me, like the lobby would say, oh, we're hunting Alatreon, and then I get there and nobody's hunting Alatreon. And so I would either leave or I would get kicked out of the lobby. Before we go on, I do want to have a quick little mini side tangent ranting about the player base at the time. Especially at higher level players, I found that they were either not very responsive on the social side of things, or they were a little mean. Yeah, again, at lower levels, players were a lot more generous and kind, and even regardless of level, it was a staple to always have, like, hello messages prepared when a new person entered the lobby. There was also, like, an honor rotating system that people would usually do when it came to quest posting, and that was really nice, you know? I just posted a quest, we did that quest, now somebody else gets to post. And that was nice and very evenly spread when you only had 4 people. So, whatever. But as I started interacting with more of the high-level players, I found that the welcoming nature to be a little bit more sparse. Sometimes, if I didn't have a set with skills that players deemed acceptable for the hunt, I would literally get kicked from the lobby. Mostly, again, we're talking about high-level stuff, so Alatreon and things like that. If I didn't have a good Alatreon set to hunt Alatreon, they'd kick me. People were a little judgy back then, and you can still see that in the forums if you go to look. That's how I learned to interact with other players, so I started adopting that judginess too back then. I would rarely, if ever, kick somebody for their gear, but I would poke fun at them and be a bit of an all-around jerk if I didn't quite like what they were doing. We teach people how we want to play with us, and I was taught that that was the way to play with people at the higher levels. Like I just said, you can still see an essence of this in the forums nowadays, but that Monster Hunter elitism is much less pronounced, and I'm very happy to hear that. Okay, next title, Monster Hunter 3U. So, the Wii U came out, and literally the only reason my family got it was for Monster Hunter 3U. This was an updated version of the game with even better visuals and way more story. Now, we did have to negotiate with our mother to get another console by giving away our Wii. She kept insisting how bad she felt that there were starving kids in Africa, and we had a third game console. It didn't really make much sense to me, because if that's your reasoning, then you would give the game console to a starving kid in Africa, but she would just donate it to the goodwill. I don't know. She's weird. I don't really like her for many other reasons. She also gave away my N64 without our knowledge. I'm not still salty about that at all. Anyway, so there was a whole new monster on the cover, the Azure Rathalos. I still enjoyed this one, though I found that it had a big flaw. I had to do everything from try all over again before I could really start experiencing the new stuff. There was no cross-save, and that makes sense with a lot of the things that they did for this new game and just really everything about it, but that was a bit of a bummer. The thing that kept me going in all of this, though, was my brother. He recently got a 3DS, so we could play together locally. That was one of the really cool things about Monster Hunter 3U. It was a cross-platform game with the Wii U and the 3DS. So that kept things from feeling too stale, because, as we all know, games are better with friends. So I managed to work through the story and get into the G rank, which is master rank nowadays, and we were eating good here. The combat was fun, the visuals were crisp, the monsters were engaging, and my brother being there every step of the way to help me out on any of my walls or give me vital information about weapons or monster tells really sold the experience. We were in quite the stride. I think I was mostly playing Switch Axe and Hunting Horn, if I remember right. At the very least, I do remember desperately fighting Devil Joe in the tundra, time and time again with my brother, and constantly being eaten by that hungering monstrosity. I finished out credits on this game, and I left satisfied, having put something like 80 hours into the game. A huge amount for the average gamer. Don't look at my runtime in World. Shh, we'll get there. Shh. Of course, my brother is way more into this installment than I am, and tells me there's actually a secret awesome boss after the credit roll of G rank. So I eventually boot the game back up and try to work my way to it, but without any sort of narrative purpose, it just feels like mindless grinding to me, so I stop playing and I never find this super secret boss. Things I loved. The colors, vivid, beautiful. They really leaned into the fantasy and the beauty, and those colors made Tri look downright drab. I also adored how they integrated the 3DS and the Wii U so my brother and I could actually play together. I didn't talk about it in Tri, so I'll bring up underwater combat here. I didn't hate it. Hot take, I know. In fact, it was one of the only things that really separated these games from other fantasy games we were playing at the time. These creatures felt so real. They spent time in the water, and it could lead to some really fun areas to discover, like Lagiacrus's home cave. Also, still on the topic of laggy here, I think it was just like a really cool way to showcase how this creature was the Lord of the Water, where Rathalos was the Lord of the Skies. The second you got into the water, this guy really, really was scary. And I don't know, maybe it was the weapons that I was playing with or something, but I didn't find underwater combat too clunky, or at least not that much more clunky than the stuff on the ground. And maybe, again, that's because I was not fantastic at the game. But I'm sad to see it go, but I totally understand why it's gone. That was a lot on the developers, and it didn't really pay off, but we see a lot of what they were going for at the heart of it later on, which we'll get to. I super also appreciated the weapons being available, all of them, at the jump. I liked the new villages they added, and the new monsters, and the mechanics were fun, and I loved Cha-Cha and Kayamba as my little companions. As a duo, they were so much more charming than just Cha-Cha, who was also charming in Tri. I would love if Capcom brought a cosmetic of these guys back. I want to hear that little Cha-Pa again. It was great. Some improvements. While I think the gameplay overall improved, I still want larger lobbies. At this point, I'm dreaming of a 16-player lobby, where there are always people gesturing at the tables, getting into arm wrestling matches. As a narrative-driven girly, I also would really appreciate an inkling of a narrative reason to continue past the main story. It'd be pretty nice. Oh, and the information on monster weaknesses and the like are way too hard to keep track of, and not all in the game. For higher level gameplay, I remember just constantly downloading Monster Hunter apps, and those were beautiful and dutifully made by the fans, but it was a lot to kind of like have on your lap, being like this app and the game going on. It was so much information that you just didn't have access to within the game. These apps were great. I mean, they would tell you monster weaknesses, they would tell you part drop rates, and sometimes they would even tell you the actual weapon upgrade tree, which brings me to the fact that in these installments, you can't see the weapon upgrade tree. If I wanted to choose both versions of a weapon upgrade, I'd have to remember exactly which upgrades brought me to that point. And I think I made a number of dead-end weapons, so to speak, that wasted a lot of time and in-game resources. I mean, if I wanted to be absolutely positive that this new monster that I hunted was something that would be part of one of the weapon trees of, say, the Sword and Shield, for example, and I didn't want to use the app, I would have to have these weapons at every single branch of the point that it could change, and just hope to eventually see the question marks get answered with, oh, this monster will make a weapon here. It's a lot of grinding that was frankly unnecessary. Overall, I would say knowledge was pretty difficult to attain and is one of the bigger critiques I had at the time, and that wouldn't really change until World, which we'll get to. Shh, don't look at the runtime. My next game was Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. It took me a while to get this game, what with my mother's strict console rule extending to no handhelds, even though my brother had one for some reason. Eventually, my brother actually got a 3DS XL and gifted me his 3DS for Christmas. Along with it, Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. This was great since my brother and I could play again. I mean, we could before, but when he moved to 4U, he kind of abandoned the 3U game. And I seriously don't blame him. These games are quite the commitment. Even if you're only putting in 80 hours, which is insane to say only putting in 80 hours for a game. But, I mean, that's what Monster Hunter is. It's so much bigger than any other game. I mean, remember how people wouldn't stop talking about how Persona 5 has an insanely long runtime of 80 to 100 hours? Again, don't look at my World runtime. We're not there yet. Well, anyway, the 4U is awesome. The 3D is, like, insane in a game like this. I felt super immersed. The areas were designed so masterfully, and gone were these series of flat arenas where we fight the monsters, and now our areas have so much verticality and mounting. Oh my gosh, mounting was so cool. Sometimes I would just spam the jumping attacks just because of how unique and fun the animations were. And let's not forget the two new weapons, the Insect Glaive and the Charge Blade, which I promptly did not touch. Too many mechanics. I mean, what do you mean I need to charge files and slot them into my shield, sword, and axe? What do you mean I have to take care of a giant insect and worry about constantly trying to get buffs off of an angry wyvern? No thank you. I'll stick with my simple melee weapons like sword and shield, or greatsword. Of course, I wasn't able to play this game quite as much with my brother as I wanted. He was already at G rank by the time I got the game, and I felt like I was kind of holding him back, making him play the lower rank hunts. And by the time I started getting into G rank, he got Generations Ultimate. I remember thinking, these games are coming out too quickly and I cannot keep up. So I stuck with 4U and played by myself while my brother went off to the next great installment. And perhaps that bitterness is why I never actually played GU, despite having the Switch edition. I also never got the final boss of this one, because I found a new and extremely unique to me wall, and that was Rajang. Rajang. I know Rajang could be a wall for a lot of people, but it was unique as to why he was a wall for me. Not only was he a very difficult monster in that he moves differently than all of the other monsters in 4U, he has crazy hard-hitting moves and is jumping around all over the map, so it's really hard to actually find a good time to hit him. But just so happened to have, prior to ever having seen his face, a nightmare about Rajang hunting me and my friends on a camping trip. I swear to you, it was Rajang. It was like a monkey with the horns and everything. And I double swear that I had never seen or heard of that thing before that dream. And then all of a sudden, this beast from my nightmares is here fighting me in a game that I enjoy. Needless to say, I put down 4U, and I never got past that point. So, the good. Monster Hunter 4U brought so many awesome mechanics and gameplay that we still see iterations on to this day. Verticality to the maps and mounting monsters being a big standout. I mean, seriously, having insect mech monsters who cannibalize their male counterparts to make a big mech version of them, and snake monsters as well. I mean, it was just so cool. Please bring back Najarala. Capcom, you're cowards. Bring back the snake monsters. But it's also worth noting how Monster Hunter integrated its story with multiple mysteries at once. You followed a caravan, meeting new people and helping their villages in an effort to learn more about this mysterious shard that the caravan leader had, all while seemingly being followed and accosted by this mysterious monster that seems like an elder dragon but isn't quite. I mean, Gormagala is a fan favorite for a reason, and this game showed him off really well. I mean, he levels up with you as a hunter, basically, because by the time he becomes Shigaru Magala, you've spent a long time hunting and being better as a player, so it's a really cool way of constantly testing your skills with this hunt. Of course, we can't forget spectacle hunts like Dalamadur. That was very, very cool and a unique way to bring these large monsters to the fight that weren't just siege quests. Jin Moran, still an awesome fight, and I'm gonna stick by that one. Also, I do want to tangent here and mention the smithy that you get in 4U. The little smithy girl from a volcano village that you help out, and she joins your caravan to explore the world beyond her small village. And when I found out that this little girl was Gemma in Wilds, I got teary-eyed literally every time I thought about it. I watched someone grow up with me through this video game. And even though we were probably pretty close to the same age as far as me versus the hunter, I still kind of saw her as this adoptive child, and maybe that was kind of the role of being the hunter, being this adult taking care of this kid. So it does make me feel pretty weird to see how Monster Hunter kind of sexualizes her in Wilds. I kind of think of her as a child, so please, I want her covered up. I mean, if she wants to show off her chest, sure, but please stop staring at her. Rurikon, please stop making such sexualized comments at all of the female body characters. It's gross. Please stop. Okay, back to the video. So the improvements. The expedition grind felt like a lot, and the mechanics I never really much enjoyed. I did not like how there was this whole separate version of all of these monsters in this one environment to try and get some version of a unique piece of equipment, but it was random chance to get those monsters. It just didn't make much sense to me. It felt like a lot of extra unnecessary grinding that is not needed in a game that is already so heavy in the grind. I was also wishing at this point that there was maybe a way to get past all of the early level grinding, especially for veterans. At this point, I was at my third game in the series, spending 80 hours in each of them more or less, and these grinding elements were really starting to overstay their welcome for me. I didn't like having to get these combo books, which, by the way, if you don't know, it was not guaranteed to get a successful combination of items without a combo book. In fact, without all 3 combo books. Without them, there is a chance that you would fail making a regular potion, which is something that is just automatically done nowadays. Like, that's crazy. I also didn't enjoy my pickaxes breaking all of the time. Like, it made me literally go, why would I spend all of the resources to have the possibility at failing making a good pickaxe that won't break as quickly than just getting the bad pickaxe and letting that break all the time in an effort to try and get my items? It felt like there was just so much more effort for so little reward. Though I will say, looking back, I did actually enjoy whetstones being a usable item. It was one of those things that helped add the pressure to be a good hunter. If you ran out of whetstones on a quest, you're not playing as good as you could be, and you should probably do better. At the time, also, I'm not the biggest fan of the ranged weapons. I've tried them, but it was so much more clunky than even the greatsword to me. I mean, mechanically, if you didn't know, the ranged weapons made you basically act like a Resident Evil character, or at least the older style, where if you want to aim, you have to stop in your tracks to do so. That, plus your lower defense on your armor, meant it was way easier for you to die, especially because you're stopped in place trying to aim at the monster. And the fact that you would have to craft a completely different armor set for ranged weapons really disincentivized me from experimenting into that field. So, to summarize, up until this point, I was passively into Monster Hunter. I played them until credits, and I enjoyed my time doing so. I loved being able to play cooperatively with my brother when so often we were competing in so many other different games, looking at Smash Bros, looking at other types of racing games, right? Most multiplayer is competitive, but Monster Hunter is this really high-end cooperative game. Though I never really had an incentive to play beyond credits, and the pace of the release schedule was just a little too fast for me to feel like I could catch up. Then Monster Hunter World came along, and man, did I go run along with it. Now we can look at my 1,000 hour runtime and figure out how we got there, because it wasn't exactly straightforward. We finally have Monster Hunter on the big screen again. The big screen, of course, being the TV and not the movie screen. Let's not ever think about that Monster Hunter movie ever again. Anyway, this meant that my brother and I could easily watch each other play and enjoy the game, even if we aren't the one actively playing. Just like the other games, I play it to credits and I enjoy my time. But then, something crazy happened. My parents got divorced. This meant a lot of things, and we're not going to get into most of those things, but one of the things it did mean was that my mother could no longer police the amount of gaming consoles we could have in the house. Pretty quickly, and by that I mean a couple years after I moved out into college, I found myself with a PS4 of my very own. And you know what that means. I can get Monster Hunter and play with my sibling again. Now, you might notice how this franchise seems to be, for me, directly tied to my brother. Like I said before, Monster Hunter is one of the few experiences I grew up with where I could be working with my sibling instead of butting heads against him like I always did. We liked a lot of the same things, but it was hard to engage in those things since they were mostly competitive, and I had a terrible combination of being both extremely competitive and also terrible at competitions. He'd kick my butt from here till Tuesday, and I could never do anything about it. But in Monster Hunter, we were an unstoppable duo. It really felt like the Sasuke-Naruto dynamic. If I had, known that at the time, that would have been a nice bit of vocabulary. But, my mother didn't think anime was good for you. It was for the devil. Enough about my mom. Back to the games. So I remember playing the entire story and playing with my brother here and there. Unfortunately, by the time I'm starting to get into it on the PS4, my brother is starting to get a new file on the PC, and there is zero crossplay. So it's back to the solo life for me. But there's something special about this second playthrough that just kind of clicks. I think I might have been using the bow at the time. Anyway, I'm super immersed into this awesome world. The graphics are beautiful, the set pieces are awesome, and the monster interactions with each other and the environment are wholly unlike anything I've seen in any other video game, period. I mean, Monster Hunter has always been special in that, like, not having a health bar really adds to the liveliness of these creatures. We can't see that they're on death's door by the pixels, but we can see that they're on death's door by the way that they limp like a creature that's wounded would. Nergigante is one of my most challenging and also most loved fights. His design as a whole feels so special while also feeling really, really grounded. The things I always think about were his roar. God, I love his roar. And it's in that beautiful dance with Nergigante that things really start to click. I kind of start to fall in love with the game. And if I needed proof that that was happening, I would find no better proof than reuniting with my old nightmare, Rajang. This guy kept haunting me. I was so distraught when I found out that he was coming to World. I was just getting into this one and I was not ready to put the game down because of this horrible monster. So I prepped as much as I could, and I actually switched weapons. If I recall right, I ended up grabbing the sword and shield off the dusty shelf and found my new main that carries me through all the way until now. Even now, I can still feel the cold sweat that overcame me as I entered the combative dance with this monkey. Its erratic movement, still horrifying, but now a little bit more readable. And with that added mobility that the hunter has, I no longer felt like I was controlling a character fighting the monkey. I was the one fighting the monkey. I finally conquered my literal nightmares. And this is truly the thing that I think sealed the deal for me in this game. I literally conquered my fears through Monster Hunter, and there was no stopping me now. I worked my way through Iceborne, I really enjoyed the Guiding Lands, I hate the literal week of non-stop playing that I did to finally beat Alatreon, but I finally beat Alatreon, and I never beat Fatalis. I vow that I will someday. We'll see. The things I love. There's so much to list, but the environments of World are on a whole other level. They're beautiful, and they really do feel like a living thing that sometimes helps you and sometimes you have to wrestle with. The weapons have all new life to them, and I find a lot of ease with the new weapon tree to craft all sorts of stuff. The accessibility afforded in this installment really made getting into this game so much easier. I know that a lot of old school hunters really dislike this sudden switch, but I cannot emphasize enough how much this accessibility made for better gameplay for me. I also really appreciated the story. Having played through it 3 or 4 times, and this is why we're at 1,000 hours, and this is also why we have yet to beat Fatalis, because I keep having to restart my weapons, and we'll get to that in a second. I'd say, overall, this story is a classic Monster Hunter story, where you come to an area, there is some unexplained phenomena, you try to find the explained phenomena, you think it's this guy, you fight him, it turns out to be some other guy, and the world could be ending from this big event. That's the classic story, and Monster Hunter World isn't really any different, but there are some really nice flourishes that I really enjoyed here and there. I never found myself wanting to skip these cutscenes, which is really good because there wasn't an option to skip the cutscenes. And before we get into the things that need improvement, I think it's super important that we go on another tangent. This time, the handler. I like her. She's not bad. Honestly, I think Super Rat does an incredible job talking about a lot of the nuances to the controversy with the handler, and that video, super worth watching. Something I would like to add is her involvement in the story. I think where a lot of the flack comes in against her is she has no weapons, so anytime she does something in a cutscene that puts her at risk, the hunter always has to come in swooping to protect her, right? You put the hunter's body between the monster and her. And she puts herself at risk a lot. So the monster hunter and their handlers or guildmarms or quest handler, however you want to say it, they've always had a pretty interesting relationship in my mind throughout the installments. One of the more funky feelings, disjointed, I don't know exactly the word right now, was when you would accept a quest to fight a world-ending elder dragon, and the person handing you the quest is like, this is single-handedly the most dangerous things we have ever heard of, let alone see. Basically, nobody sees this thing and lives, and it's more of a myth than we could ever imagine. Good luck out there. Have fun. I'm going to be sitting here in this village while you do all of the work. And that always felt weird to me. And apparently Capcom felt the same because they had the handler be way more involved in the story than ever before. She's right there beside the hunter as you save the day. I mean, we find that Capcom is trying to give her more utility. She can cook for you when you're out hunting, where we see her in cutscenes trying to solve mysteries and setting up base camps. She's inquisitive and she wants to know you, the player, and become your friend. So why is she so disliked? Well, I think part of the difficulty in her is her very light-hearted attitude combined with her intense risk-taking without a weapon means that in the cutscenes she's constantly being perceived as needing to be rescued by the hunter time and time again. I genuinely think that if they gave her some ability to get out of harm's way on her own, people would not dislike her as much. A good example of her doing this is when she sets up the first camp in the Rotten Vale and she uses the fire pods to disperse the Gyros. But we don't get any more of that. Anytime she does something else like that, the hunter has to go in and save her. So do that and people are gonna like her, or at least not dislike her as much. Normal people, of course. I'm not gonna consider the opinions of the people who make those horrible, I fixed this ugly woman mod. The handler is pretty shush. Like, genuinely, give her a staff like her mentor has that gets her out of situations, or let her use the ghillie mantle or smoke bombs, or like any of the other items that the hunter actually uses to get out of these dangerous situations. And then you don't need the hunter to intervene all the time, and the handler would suddenly be a companion that everybody would enjoy. I am certain of this. Okay, tangent over. Now, to the things that I think could use improvements. So I kind of gotta talk about the clutch claw. Everybody talks about the clutch claw, and so I can't really ignore it. At higher level play, the thing is pretty intrusive. Yes, for the most part, you don't need to use it for every hunt. In fact, I basically ignored it my whole time. Like, unless there was like a nice little opportunity to get like a little weak spot or a tenderize, I kind of wouldn't use it. But with Alatreon and Fatalis, along with other late game monsters like Raging Brachydios, the game really pushed you to make sure that you're weakening that monster's hide with the Clutch Claw. And those opportunities to do so are already so rare that when you combine it with things like light weapons, like the sword and shield, it can feel like half of your hunt time is dedicated to clutch clawing the monster, and that's just not fun. I want to be using my weapon. I don't want to be using the clutch claw. Other things. I miss the vibrancy of the colors from the handheld titles. Please bring those back. This game is beautiful, but I don't like the drab colors. I want, at the very least, to up the saturation. That's all I want. And there aren't mods for that. Not good ones, at least. Also, I don't like the grind for decorations. This feels like a very cynical way to keep people playing the game so they can hopefully maybe one day possibly maybe get a good deco. This grind extends to things like the, the Kov Tarath and Safi Jiva weapons, as well as transmogrification, or transmog, as people like to call it, layered weapons and layered armor, as we know them now. Back then, I mean, it was nice to have for World, but the system was just a little bit too much of a grind to make it worth it. And you kind of needed it for the slap-on weapon designs, because those were pretty bad. But I always gave a tiny bit of leniency for this, because the developers needed to get the game out eventually. But hey, they could always let games take a little longer to come out finished and not need so many patches. Hopefully, that's not a trend we see growing in the video game industry. Also, I finally got my wish of 16 players lobbies! Yay! But something felt off. I didn't feel incentivized to be in those groups. I don't know, maybe it was the fact that you're forced to be online all the time, so you didn't get a choice to be with a group, and you would just kind of like boot up into somebody else's lobby without them like necessarily wanting you, if they were just hoping for a solo experience. Or maybe it was also the existence of the SOS flare. Something that makes sense in the lore, but it really makes the social aspect of a lobby useless. I mean, why would I need to try and find a lobby of people also searching for parts or monsters, as I am, when I can just look up an SOS flare instead, and come into these randos, hunt the thing with them, and then leave? Also, basically, no one is giving nice little greetings anymore when someone entered the lobby. Every time somebody entered my lobby for the first, 40 hours, I would give a little hello, and then they wouldn't respond. It's just how it went. This trend of lobbies feeling void of the interpersonal charm, unfortunately, kind of continues through Wilds. Yes, Wilds has a couple of things that are different, right? There's a lot more to do in the lobby that I feel like they incentivize, and guild lobbies, of course, are a completely different story. Those people are deliberately going, you're cool, we want to hang with you more, so come with us and you'll always be in this lobby, and we will always have something to talk about, you and I, or play about, you and I don't know. But I do miss the days where you walk in to 3 other people with the same goal as you, all grinding out until you get what you need. There's this personal connection that I would get with my fellow hunters when they still didn't get that gem, or someone got 3 gems in a row. I mean, we would end a quest and check in on the other people in the lobby. They wouldn't feel like strangers anymore. We'd ask, oh, what did you get? Oh, what do we want to do next? But now with the SOS flares, you never see that person again. You don't know why they fired the flare, and if they even got what they were looking for. You also can't talk about the hunt afterwards, being like, oh man, this part is really hard to dodge. Do you guys have any tips on that? You're just one and done. I think a really good way to fix the SOS flare system is tie them to the person's lobby. What I mean by that is when you join someone's SOS quest, you join their lobby and go back to that lobby that person is in. I mean, that makes sense in my mind. I want to check in with this person that I help. I don't want to just vanish into the night the second I'm not done helping with them, or at least an option to join their lobby. You do an SOS flare, and then you're back in the lobby that you were in, where people already weren't really interacting with you. So why not go to the lobby that you just interacted with people in? Does that make sense? On a whole, that's about 3 pages of writing for Monster Hunter World, and I think it's time we move on to Rise. So Rise comes out, and I am, at this point, officially more into Monster Hunter than my brother. We both get it, but I get it. I even try streaming for a bit. Hopefully I do that again soon. I just need to find the right hardware and good space for it. But for the first time in the series, I'm the one showing my brother a monster he hasn't seen before, which feels weird and kind of cool. We get to finally flip the script there. We start off working together, but I just dive deeper than he ever does with Rise, and especially Sunbreak. Now I'm playing these games more for me, rather than connecting to my brother. And you know what? I'm an adult now, who can connect with him in other aspects than just gaming. So that's nice. So Rise does something absolutely revolutionary in the Monster Hunter franchise. They give their characters names! This is insane! For the first time ever, you're now no longer talking to the Handler or the Guildmon, but Hinoa and Minoto, twin Wyverians, one of whom shares a psychic bond with some of the monsters. That's not your chef, but Yomogi, a cheery, bright-eyed girl with a mysterious past. These are now more than just their occupations. They're people with emotions that are being put out right on their sleeve. And they fight with you in very specific scenarios. In the new Rampage mechanic, you can find them joining in small bursts to help lend a hand. They're not hunters after all, they can't put themselves in too much harm. The combat in this game seems super flashy, and I rather enjoy the hunter arts. I mean, Silkbind attacks. They're definitely not hunter arts. This is a different game. They're Silkbind attacks. They add this cool depth to the weapons, and in concept at least, it means that you could have a squad of 4 people all rocking the exact same weapon, playing them in completely different ways. Unfortunately, this doesn't quite pan out as they hoped, since more often than not, there were just plain old superior options to every single Silkbind. Honestly, the developers, on a whole, are absolutely cooking, making these hunts feel like a beautiful dance between the hunter and the monster. And they're able to achieve this at lower levels too, not just talking about like AT Valkana and things like that. Rathalos is a really good example. In the old gym, he lives up to this reputation of being king of the skies by literally never coming down. It's basically like you're not fighting him. But in Rise, he's on the ground more than ever, but his attacks all seem to involve some sort of aerial move, incorporating his mastery of the air. It's a way to acknowledge his lore while still making it mechanically interesting and fun to play against. In Rise alone, if we're talking about runtime, I log 400 hours, and I put about another 400 hours in Sunbreak. Rise was fun. The combat was fast and frenetic, the stylization was cute and engaging, and you could have a cat and dog companion too. Oh my gosh, finally, I no longer just had my cat named after my actual cat, but I could name my dogs after my family dogs too. The Palamute system was an incredible addition to the series. I really liked having a dog companion. I didn't like the army of cats and dogs. I prefer having just one that you upgrade rather than having to train an entire army, but there's some cute and positive aspects to that too. And look, I know that World technically laid the groundwork with the Tail Riders, but Palamutes all but sealed the deal on riding companions for the rest of the series. Now you could have these large worlds to traverse and not feel like it's an absolute slog. Of course, it also helped that you could basically be Spider-Man and web-sling around the map. Everybody wants to be Spider-Man. Now, you might have noticed that for this one specifically, I didn't really bring up a specific story or a monster, and instead just kind of went straight into the things that I like. And I think there's a reason for that. While the gameplay itself is intense and fun and the characters are cool, this game lacks a huge standout moment with me, you know? I mean, the hunts go by so fast, and the story is way less engaging than World, despite having named characters. One of the biggest factors, I think, for this lack of engagement is the pandemic, right? It forced the game out, and it straight up did not have a whole story attached to it. It wasn't finished. And this was a first for the Monster Hunter franchise that I really felt. Monster Hunter had always been known for being a complete package on purchase. It's one of the things that this series was standing out from so many otherwise great games that were being bogged down by companies trying to eke out every little penny from their consumers by cutting off vital sections of their game and reselling it to you as DLC. Cough cough Mass Effect, and cough cough EA as a whole. We'll get into monetized DLC in a little bit, but Monster Hunter Rise comes out and it's missing its story. It's missing the end. The player gets through the flagship and the secret next boss, but this game was intended to have a secret final boss and a number of other monsters that didn't come out until a little later in the game's life cycle. That made quite the impact on the impressions for this game. I mean, I could feel that this game was missing something from the jump. It also had other problems that made story moments feel a little shallow. While these characters had names and bits of background, they weren't really integrated into the story of hunts. Besides Hinoa and Minoto, with their psychic link to the monsters, none of these characters were seen interacting with the hunts beyond rampages. Yes, their village dealt with the rampage every however many years, but that's lore connection, that's not in-game connection. We don't see them going out into the field like the handler before them, and there's this story disconnect back, just like the older Monster Hunter titles. And then you couple this with the odd choice to have multiple credit rolls throughout the game. I mean, beating the easy peasy low rank involves only beating Magnamalo, and boom, you get credits. In Tri, you beat the flagship in solo, and it's very obvious there's still more game. Credits don't roll until you beat the actual cause of the calamity that's facing Moga, and that's Sideas. But here, you get credits on Magnamalo, with vague hints that the story can continue. This flattens the whole experience, especially when you take into account this is by far the easiest of Monster Hunter titles at this point. Hunts rarely last 10 minutes, if that. Most hunts are sub 5. I mean, sure, this makes sense from a handheld perspective. You're playing on the train type of gameplay, but you combine that with the other things and you have an overall flatter experience, which segues nicely into the maps. We're back to these more flattened arenas. Sure, there's verticality in how the hunters traverse to the maps with the Spider-Manning and the little bits of mountain, but the areas are largely wide, flat arenas to hunt in. And I get it, it's a limitation on hardware and there's a different focus this time, but still, it kind of sucks going from World to this. It doesn't suck as bad for me because I played the old school Monster Hunter stuff, so it just kind of felt like a return to form, but I can understand how it really sucks for somebody whose first experience is World, where things are way more intricate. Of course, those people have to understand, again, hardware limitations, and I don't think a lot of people put that into account, and that's on them. So then, Sunbreak comes along, and the game changes entirely. Literally. Sunbreak has to be its own separate thing in this video because it really feels like a separate game. Where previous titles had the expansion be a harder or more fleshed out game, and World made it feel like it was a second chapter to the story, Sunbreak feels like a direct response to the gaming audience more than ever before. They update and change a lot of the criticisms that are weighed against Rise, and they fully ditch the Japanese village aesthetic, opting for a more medieval one when you fight takes on classic European monsters from folklore. There's a werewolf, a vampire who's actually a knight in an eternal battle with a literal devil. Yeah, take that, Doctor Who and Shadow. We have the devil from the Bible too, kind of. And you also have Frankenstein. Yeah, no, it's Frankenstein. It's not Frankenstein's monster, because Adam is Victor's son, which makes him... Anyway. I don't know where I'm going with this. Anyway, so the characters are also now deeply integrated into the story, having full involved arcs, and that's just mwah, right? It's perfect. The combat is now more demanding, and no one can say that Sunbreak is an easy baby game for babies, except those who do, and they're either being a contrarian or they're being an elitist, so forget their opinions. Sunbreak that took an okay game with great frenetic gameplay, but a nothing burger of a story and a slow rollout of necessary bits, and it turned it into a true masterpiece of hunting. The Affliction made hunting every type of monster viable, something no other Monster Hunter has ever done. The better you hunt them, the stronger they get, and the better you have to get in turn. It's perfect. The gameplay loop rewards aggressive and vicious actions against the monster because if you don't, they'll do it against you. It's really good. It's really, really good. Okay, so let's try and take a look at this as one whole game, which is hard. The good. So much I already talked about, but to reiterate, the gameplay is very tight and some of the most fun I had playing any of the weapons. I also appreciated its need to earn Silkbind attacks by making multiple weapons in that tree. It's a nice way to integrate this feeling of working for your rewards in terms of weapons, like what I talked about in Try with the weapon tree, but not nearly as detrimental. The music was fun, though no real bangers for me. I loved that the characters are getting names now and being integrated more fully into the story, especially with this as their second attempt to do so cinematically. I give Capcom high praise for that. The companions are a lovely addition, and their leaning into the cute factor is honestly a really good thing for me, and I want to see this trend continue. So, on to the improvements. The things about this game. The way it rolled out slowly was abysmal, and Monster Hunter for the first time started to show its corporate colors that we see in a lot of other big popular games nowadays. And unfortunately, it wasn't just the slow roll of the story that showed these colors. World had, for the first time, integrated paid DLC in the form of cosmetics for your handler and gestures and the like, and that sucked, and that's awful because those used to be items that you had to earn by completing a unique quest, but now some of the coolest ones are locked behind a paywall, and that's poo-poo, right? But it was way easier in World to turn your head and look the other way because those were just like these tiny little things that didn't really affect much. But Sunbreak leaned into it more. Paid armor for your hunter, not just your handler. Paid weapons. Paid weapons. These are two things that are at the core of what Monster Hunter is as a game. You hunt the monster to make weapons and armor of that monster. And they went and did away with what that was through paid weapons and armor. This obviously caused a lot of backlash in the community and a lot of division. Some people would kick another player from their game if they saw that person with these paid weapons. And look, I don't want to advocate being mean to people, right? I had my own story about feeling bad about being booted from lobbies in Try. But these paid weapons really felt like crossing a picket line. And I think booting somebody from the lobby for crossing that line is justifiable versus Try, where it was just that I didn't have the things that they liked. In this scenario, you are actively supporting a process and a choice that the community as a whole does not want to support. And so it's a little different, right? Now, of course, harassing, bullying, obviously not justifiable, but saying, hey, you did something in support of a real problem with the gaming industry, and I want you to understand that I don't want to play with you because of that. I don't know. I think that's a pretty civil way of voicing an opinion. One which seems to have been at least somewhat heard, since I don't recall any weapon DLCs in Wilds yet. Hopefully that never comes up. Or maybe I'm not noticing it. Anyway, another thing that really harmed the experience of Rise Sunbreak, and I'm so upset to see it return in Wilds, is the complete removal of tracking a monster. From the jump, every single monster is visible on your map at all times. There are no surprises, no wondering what's waiting around the corner, no tracking the monster in any way. They're there. Always. And the in-universe explanation is kind of lazy. It's your owl is giving you a bird's eye view of the place, and therefore that's why you can see the map and see where all of the monsters are all the time, but I don't know. I feel like they could have made the owl show up on parts of the map, and you had to check in with it to get the monster's location for a set time. Like, some way of actually making the choice to see the monsters would have been really helpful, because as it stands in Rise Sunbreak, there is no hunting. You are just running to go fight the monster. The closest thing you're doing that isn't hunting is go grabbing your Spear Birds, which I would do every time, because otherwise these hunts would take like 2 minutes, and that's just too small of a time. And I get the tracking mechanic was a little controversial in World, but I personally really loved the attempt that they were making there to lean into this idea of stalking and hunting your prey. And I think Capcom could try to iterate on this concept and find a version of it that people really love. If we're going to go on a tangent of tracking, then I'm going to continue on World and say I think one of the ways that you could do that is, one, not make tracking disappear over time. In World and Iceborne, if you didn't hunt a monster for a long enough time, you would lose knowledge on that monster, and I think that was a bad choice. Because what it would mean is if, I haven't hunted Rathalos in a long time, but now I'm trying out these new weapons and I need to hunt Rathalos again to get this weapon that I want, well, I have to go back to the grindstone of finding every single footprint and going, I don't know where this guy is because he's not showing up on the map because it's been too long since I've hunted him, but I've hunted 100 Rathalos, so I should know, right? So, keep that there. And also, I did really enjoy that the more you hunted the monster, the more you learned about its weak zones and all of that. I would love to see that kind of progression in knowledge continue through, rather than just being constantly had. Because the idea here is that you are progressing as a hunter in the game. And so it makes sense that you would progress in your knowledge within the game. Okay, tangent over. To finish my thing on Rise and Sunbreak, I think it's far from perfect. And when you need your expansion to fix all of your mistakes from the base game, that makes a very flawed game. And Rise needed Sunbreak for those mistakes to be fixed. And while it was enough for people like me, because again, I spent something like 800 hours in the game, it wasn't enough for my brother. We never got to the final boss together, the literal devil from the Bible. Suck it, Shadow. And as much as I tried to get him to play that deep, it just never really clicked. He enjoyed the bits that he did play from Sunbreak, but Rise, I think, burned him just a little too much, along with this unnecessary grinding from Iceborne. This was really the first time that I definitely outpaced my brother, and it was a strange shift in our Monster Hunter dynamic. So, before Wilds even came out, I was losing my mind for it. The things that they were showing, the weather systems, the graphics, the music. I literally wept the first time I listened to the music. And if you haven't done so, I highly recommend just sitting down and listening to Wild's soundtrack. I mean, all of Monster Hunter, they never really miss, but this one outshines everything. There is an extra orchestral element to it that's just so gorgeous. Like, you could listen to these things and not go, oh, this is from a video game. And I think that's really nice. You could impress your grandma with going, listen to this, and then just don't tell her where it's from. And, yeah. So, between Rise and Wilds, I start to successfully convert my friends, not just my brother, over to Monster Hunter. I've been talking to them about it since Try, but Wilds is kind of one of the more accessible things, and so is Rise. So now I don't have to solely rely on my brother for any co-op experience with people I already know and like. And with Wilds as a talking point now, I can get people even more excited as we share all of our theories for what's going to happen. I remember thinking that, you were going to get younger versions of monsters when we saw that little seemingly baby version of Puke Puke, which isn't Puke Puke. And I'm so glad Puke Puke is not in this game. I feel like he's not good enough to do more than 2 games in a row. He's great, don't get me wrong. I enjoy him, but I think Koro Puke Puke is better. Anyway. So I had never been more excited for an installment of this franchise, and it helped that they took an extra year to really hone in on their complex ideas. And at the time of writing this, I have about 200 hours in Wilds. I've fought every monster, I haven't beaten the 9-star variants, and I find myself pausing when I try to think about what I want to say for this game. And maybe that's because it's still so fresh in that I'm still playing it, but I'll start with what I know. I love so much about this game. The environments breathe now like never before with constant shifting weather and roaming herds of monsters. I'll say it again, herds of monsters, and not just the small herbivores, but the bigger guys. Though the system, I think, could be implemented better. I want to see a whole pack of Rathian and Rathalos. Please, come on, Capcom, swing for the fences here. The developers, anyway, put a lot of work in inviting the hunter to just wander around an area, hunting what's available, getting lost in the deep flora and fauna of every single environment. I mean, seriously, if you haven't already, take 5 minutes out in any of the maps, turn your HUD off, and just wander. It's the most diverse and living ecosystem yet, and none of it bogs down the gameplay, in my opinion. Unlike how Red Dead Redemption 2 does with its lack of fast travel and all of the other slow, boring mechanics. You know, sorry to diss on Red Dead Redemption 2, but I think it's clunky for the sake of not fun. Anyway, this depth of environment is there if you want it, and it actually can impact you, like how you can start wildfires with your weapons. The interlocking systems on interlocking systems really makes the Wilds feel alive in a way that I've never really felt in a video game before. Okay, another slight tangent. I know, long run time. Sometimes when I watch a really beautiful film, it makes the world I now live in real life feel more beautiful. And when I saw The Wind Rises, I found a Ghibli-like beauty in the world around me for at least a month. Art has that power to impact the way in which a person lives. The care and love the developers put into creating such a responsive world makes me appreciate all the interlocking systems that exist in our real life on a day-to-day basis. The wonder of the cosmos, that all of these things come to be, where I can look out my window and see a fire station that's refurbished to provide food for those who need. And the smell of a bakery beneath my apartment and the sound of each car holding another person's life as it whisks them away to wherever they're going. All of this interacts with me, and I interact with it. Anyway, I want to save that for a Wind Rises video. We're going to go back to Monster Hunter now. The story, oh my gosh, I actually really love this story. Now, some people dog on the story for being the same basic type, more or less ripping off a 4U story, and I get it. I hear that, and yeah, to an extent, sure. I mean, thing is though, a lot of Monster Hunter stories are all very similar. Like how every Power Ranger episode and series all follow the same basic formula, and this one is no different in its main points. The thing that sets Monster Hunter Wilds apart is its interest in examining the story. You get to see people have character arcs in real time as they feel their emotions. Is it cheesy? Yes. And that's always been Monster Hunter. But there's so much earnestness in their attempt here, and I feel it. Nata being lost, trying to find out what happens to his family. I'm genuinely concerned that they're all dead and this poor kid is going to be left alone. I loved seeing how he learned about the delicate balance of nature and how Arkfeld wasn't allowed that balance. And when he decides to learn to become a hunter, I got teary-eyed thinking about how much he's grown. I am so excited to see what happens to him in the expansion. And Alma, we finally get a handler that accomplishes what the handler from World was trying to accomplish all along. She's smart, caring, holds a lot more power and authority than the handler does, since she speaks on behalf of the guild in basically every cutscene. And that authority, I think, is key, with her being very level-headed. Something else I super appreciate about this installment is a way better realization of this concept, that hunters are the ones who keep balance to the ecosystem. In World, they really did a cool exploration of the balance of humans and nature and how we don't always have control of that, and there are some great video essays about that. And Wilds focuses more on the fact that we actually make a bigger impact than we often think. A lot of these monsters get hunted because they get too close to a village or they're directly impacting somebody's life. And here in Wilds, we get to see what people are doing that cause this action. I'm not trying to make it sound victim blamey, because that's not what they're going for. It's just that these characters do things that have an impact on the world around them, and the game takes no small pains to let the player know how much our actions affect the environment. I have to say, one of my all-time favorite story beats is when the hunters, Tashin, Nata, and the people of Suja are all gathered around trying to figure out what to do about Soshia, the man-made elder dragon that seemingly wiped out the entire city-state of Wyveria single-handedly, the equal dragon weapon, which is so cool that they bring it into this game like this. So, keeping this monster alive spells certain doom for the inhabitants of the wilds, but killing it can bring about the slow death of all of these creatures by destroying the dragon spire, and all of the surrounding environments get destroyed from that too. So, who at the table gets to make the call, you know? The hunters? No, the guild has not made formal relations with any of these people, and they hold no actual authority on the place. They don't really know it. The keepers? Well, they've been shut out from everyone around them as penance for their sins of so many generations past that most of those people don't even know what they did. How could they be the authority on this? Nata has the power to destroy the dragon torch, sure, but like, he's a kid. He's got to make a world-altering choice like that? Well, so how about the people of Suja? They're in a similar boat where their roles have been more peaceful overseers, not judge, jury, and executioners. This is a beautifully nuanced scene as everybody debates and makes valid points for who gets to decide what happens, and the fact that this is in a Monster Hunter game is insane. It's so cool to see this. And eventually, of course, at the last minute, the hunter comes down and saves the day with one of the coolest lines the game had been subtly prepping you for the whole time. This is where we insert the... Ugh! It's sick. It's so cool. Okay, other things I love that didn't quite fit into the other spots. I love how all of the skills being adapted to being on weapons for aggro skills and on armor for utility. That's sweet. This genuinely helps you get away from only give me crit builds, because it's so much harder to get 100% crit. So I find myself much more getting sets for unique types of skills like evade or evade window or slugger or handicraft without feeling like I'm losing to the meta. It was a very smart way to make sure people weren't optimizing the fun out of the game. And I love how smooth each weapon feels. The sword and shield is a really good example, as now you can keep your feet moving as you go through specific combos and travel at incredible distances without ever losing contact with the monster. Now, the closest thing I have to a critique on this specific mechanic of smoothness is sometimes it's a little too smooth. On occasion, I can't quite tell what my hunter is doing, and I find myself overcommitting or straight up not doing anything. Anyway, back to the good. They brought Lagiacrus back, 10 out of 10, perfect game, no notes. I appreciate how the Sacred's Pouch is a different way to encourage trying other weapons. While not quite as used as everybody thought it would be, I find myself bringing one of my mains as a backup if I'm trying a new weapon. This genuinely makes it feel less daunting to try something new because I have a hard time and need to lock in. Well, I know my crutch of a weapon is just a whistle away. Also, the Sacred, perfect little guy that's just cute enough while not making a distracting amount of cuteness like a Palamute would in this specific setting. And people are worried that it makes the game too easy, and I understand the frustration of being able to just hop on your Sacred and get everything you could ever need, but like every mechanic in Monster Hunter, it does take some skill to use, and over-reliance can lead to feints, which happens to me, especially at the higher levels. It doesn't happen as much at the lower levels, but that's for the people who are still getting used to the game. Let them have a little bit of leniency. Okay, so where are the places with room for improvement? Honestly, I feel like we're kind of in nitpicking territory, which is my favorite place to be. For one, I would love something like the anomaly system be in the end game. That way, even low-level monsters can make a big impact in a way that, the devs should always be striving for. If Doshagama is one of my favorite monsters, I would love to see attempts to make him more relevant to the endgame hunting. I mean, what is it? The Fulgur Anjanath is actually a really good example of this, where in Iceborne and in Wilds, he had this integration and was really hard at the start, but he's just kind of a pushover when you get to the endgame. I would also love to see tracking make its way back to the game. In Wilds, we don't have a Kahoot, and we still see the whole map at all times with the monsters at all times. In World, the map and tracking was put in place because the pathways to each area was really hard to navigate. And sure, there's some of that present in Wilds, but genuinely, I am able to more comfortably turn off the minimap and find the game so much more engaging to navigate. And the navigation is legitimately much simpler than World, and it's very possible for someone like me who gets as lost as easy as I do to navigate. So, some way of earning the monster's marker on the map would be really appreciated. It doesn't have to be as robust as World, but something. I would also love to see more variation in the types of hunting we do. I mean, come on, we have the possibility of herd monsters. We should have legitimate rampages or stampedes going through as a quest thing. Also, I'm missing my Jin Moran type of fight, my siege fights. Jendahad, don't get me wrong, very awesome. But I need a little bit of loading up the cannons and occasionally fighting on the monster's back type of quest. We see what they're able to do with the on-ground spectacle in Wilds. And then you go ahead and put that on sand ships like we have in the opening sequence? Or maybe we get something in the air? I don't know. We just have more possibilities that I would love to see expanded on. I also mentioned in the last section that animations are a little too smooth. I would like to add in here that it's kind of hard to tell which kind of knockback a monster's attack is giving the hunter. There are now, I think, like 3 or 4, there are new ways a hunter can be knocked back. There's on your butt, which has come in since World. There's on your back, and you roll out of it, more or less, not getting any iframes. And then there's fully on your back. Fully on your back gives you iframes like it always has when you just lie there. But the other two don't, and that's fine. But what's not fine is when I can't tell if I'm about to get the on the back iframes or not, because the second type is also a knockback that takes you on your back, and is sometimes can be a little too hard to read. And if someone has tips on reading that, I would love to see that in the comments, because I keep getting whacked and then I try to get up and I had iframes, so I lose the iframes, or I don't try to get up thinking I have iframes and I don't have iframes and I faint, and that's not as fun. I Also, in improvements, would love to see those SOS flare changes that I talked about in World, so that the lobbies feel more like I'm interacting with people again, and that those interactions aren't just reserved for guilds. In fact, I think it would be a good way to kind of build up guilds. Okay, so that's what I have for Wilds. And I gotta say, I think it's one of the strongest entries in the franchise, coupled with some changes that smoothed over a lot of its older personality that I think new and old fans would really enjoy in this new realized world. We've seen some mechanics get worked on in the background, and the heart behind them brought back in other forms that have been praised highly, and I would like to see that with some of the other older mechanics that many wave away as quality of life improvements make their return. Because the thing is, the game, just like the animations, are starting to get just a little too smooth. It needs that touch of roughness to make the smooth moments stand out. So here we are at the end of the script that ended up being so much longer than I thought it would be. That's my journey through Monster Hunter. Like I said, I'm about 200 hours into Wilds, and I've basically done everything. I'm not a completionist, but I've fought all the monsters and got a lot of the stuff. I have actually downloaded Generations Ultimate, though I haven't really touched it much, and I might get into that soon. There's a beauty in the mundane that I think the old titles capture in a way that's totally different than how Wilds does it. This series has changed a lot through the years, but it is really interesting for me to look back at my time and see how much stays the same. You're still hunting monsters, the weapons are still a blast to play with, and the environments are still something that captures the imagination. And the monsters are still living, the story is still cheesy, and I'm still using this game to connect with my brother. He's about to move in with me, and I'm so excited to be able to play with him in the same room again, shouting at each other and looking at our faces when we overcome an obstacle we never thought we would. Monster Hunter was one of the first places we could experience that kind of camaraderie, and I'll be forever grateful. And I'm super happy that it still is one of those places that we can do that. So, that's it. That's this video. Holy crap. That's a long runtime. I wasn't expecting that, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe I make more videos. Hopefully I do. Anyway, that's all I got. See you in the next one.